Hello, my name is Samir Patel, and I'm a graduate student at Emory University in Atlanta. In this speech, I will explain my views on our Constitution for the Constituting America Foundation's We the Future 2020 Scholarship Contest. The Constitution carries a deep meaning for me. I've served in the Army for 10 years, deployed to Iraq and Afghanistan, and I'm continuing my service to the nation in the Army Reserves. And as I thought about the Constitution and the values of the Constituting America Foundation, I immediately recalled my officer oath that I took and have delivered to others several dozen times in the course of my career. The oath itself is as follows. I, Samir Patel, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, that I take this obligation freely, without any mental reservation or purpose of evasion, and that I will well and faithfully discharge the duties of the office of which I'm about to enter. So help me God. I want to point out that this formal oath, spoken with my right hand over my heart, is only a public declaration of what was already defined in my role as a citizen and voter. As an American, my duty is always to protect and serve the Constitution. I don't need an oath to afford me this responsibility. It was assigned to me at birth when I became a citizen. The idea that upholding the Constitution is a requirement for all of us lies at the heart of this speech today, and will eventually help answer my primary question, which is, are the Articles of the Constitution protecting Americans' freedoms? To critically examine the Constitution is to do exactly what the founders intended. Thomas Jefferson, Benjamin Franklin, and others didn't view the Constitution as some rigid decree, but rather a living document, a framework that could stand up to scrutiny and adjust to the needs of the people over time. Rather than a set of rules, the 7 Articles of the Constitution guide us in achieving the visionary aims set out by the preamble, which are to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty for ourselves and our posterity. It's this last proclamation to secure the blessings of liberty, and more specifically, the right to privacy, is what I am concerned with today. Does the Constitution truly help us achieve freedom and liberty, especially in the 21st century? To answer this question, we first need to have a firm understanding of what the Articles of the Constitution are and what each of them means. It is helpful to think of these articles as a framework for how our government should operate. Article 1, it outlines the functioning of Congress, our legislative branch, with the upper house representing the states, the Senate, and the lower house representing the people, the House of Representatives. It also establishes the legislative branch's powers, which are to regulate commerce among the states, to coin money, and to collect taxes. In short, this article lays the foundation for the representative democracy that we Americans cherish. It's our direct link to Capitol Hill. Article 2 establishes the executive branch, the office of the president. And among the powers it bestows the president are the ability to make treaties with Senate approval, receive ambassadors, and appoint officers like myself. It requires the president to update the Congress and the people with the State of the Union and to ensure that laws are faithfully executed. And in Section 4, it outlines that the president can be impeached for treason, bribery, or other high crimes and misdemeanors. Impeachment is probably the ultimate check on presidential power and requires a supermajority vote in the Senate. Article 3, it establishes the judicial branch as composed of the Supreme Court and other courts established by Congress. It outlines that the court will hear matters dealing with the Constitution, treaties, and disputes between the state. It also outlines that all trials except those dealing with impeachment will be heard by a jury. The Supreme Court acts as the final interpreter of the Constitution. Article 4 outlines the relationship between states and the nature of our republic. It clarifies how our 50 states are to interact with each other. For example, somebody convicted of a crime in one state cannot flee to another state to avoid prosecution. Article 4 also outlines the duties of the federal government to the states, such as protecting the states from invasion. Article 5, it designs the amendment process to the Constitution, which in effect renders the whole Constitution as a living document. It can be changed. It says that an amendment to the Constitution can be proposed by a 2/3 vote of both houses or a convention of 2/3 of the state legislators, and that an amendment must be ratified by 3/4 of the state legislators or the conventions. The Constitution has been amended 27 times since it was ratified. Article 6, it establishes the Constitution and any related legislation as the supreme law of the land. This is commonly known as the Supremacy Clause. It also bounds the state legislators and judges to also take an oath or make an affirmation to support the Constitution as part of their duties. In other words, the Constitution is, or should be, the guiding star for our elected officials and appointed officials. And finally, Article 7 provided for how the Constitution itself could be ratified by the states. Delaware was the first state to ratify in December 1787, and the Constitution was legalized formally with New Hampshire's vote in June 1788. Now, to answer the question of whether these 7 articles are defending Americans' freedoms is not a straightforward one. Thousands of Supreme Court cases have been heard. 33 amendments to the Constitution have been made, and 46 presidents have been elected since the Constitution was ratified in June 1788. In almost 250 years of our country's existence, much has changed. There are many instances where these 7 articles have served the American people well by ensuring the blessings of liberty. However, there are also instances where, due to the interpretation by all 3 branches of the government, our freedoms have also been curtailed. As I said in my introduction, the most important truth to understand about the Constitution is that each American has a responsibility to uphold the articles of the Constitution, regardless of whether like me, they took a formal oath or not. Seen in this way, the responsibility for defending American freedoms cannot rest with one document alone, but rather on successive generations of Americans who have taken seriously their responsibilities to uphold it as citizens. Let's talk more about executive overreach. To illustrate the point that the ultimate defender of American freedom rests with the people and not with the Constitution per se, I will use the example of increasing executive branch overreach. This problem may seem first glance to rest with the President, Congress, or perhaps even the framers of the Constitution themselves because they wrote it. But it really traces back to us, the voters. In reality, America's presidents have long sidestepped Congress to act unilaterally on issues they consider important or part of their own political agenda. The first official executive order was made in 1862 by President Lincoln, and since then, according to the Federal Register, there have been 13,947 executive orders since. The constitutionality of executive orders is debatable, but the good news is that they can be curtailed by the courts, as when the Supreme Court struck down President Truman's order to nationalize steel production during the Korean War, and more recently by Congress, as when John Boehner sued the Obama administration over changes to the Affordable Care Act. A more stark example of this is the current debate over privacy. I submit to you that one of the most important rights afforded to Americans is the right to privacy. And at one point, we lived in an America where the government could listen in on your conversations without a warrant. I'd like to quote a synopsis of this issue from the American Civil Liberties Union, and I quote, "In December 2005, it was discovered that the National Security Agency, of which its head is appointed by the President, was tapping into telephone calls of Americans without a warrant, in direct violation of federal statutes and the Constitution. Furthermore, the agency also had gained direct access to the telecommunications infrastructure through some of America's largest companies. The program was confirmed by President Bush and other officials who boldly insisted, in the face of all the precedent beforehand and the common understanding of the law, that this program was somehow legal. And the agency appears not only to have been eavesdropping on the conversations of Americans in this country without warrants, but it was also using broad data mining systems that allowed it to analyze information about the communications of millions of innocent people within the United States. In August 2006, in a lawsuit brought by the ACLU, a federal judge found actually that the program was both unconstitutional and illegal. But to add further confusion, the U.S. Court of Appeals actually overturned that decision, but remarkably did not actually conclude the legality on the program at all. I ask you, where was the debate and consideration before Congress before this program was enacted? Did the president really not have any notion that violating the privacy of Americans without a warrant would run counter to the Constitution? Where was it cleared by bodies outside the executive branch to ensure this program was in fact constitutional? If it was constitutional, what did the Bush administration have but to fear by consulting Congress beforehand? Judicial and congressional checks on presidential power require elected and appointed officials to put our country and our Constitution ahead of politics, ideology, and maybe even personal political agendas. To go against, say, a president of their own political party when they deem that executive orders are unconstitutional, can we imagine such selfless and bold acts in our own age of political polarization? But while it may be easy to blame the expansion of presidential power on Congress or the courts, again, the ultimate check on the power of the executive branch is with us. We elect the members of the House and the Senate, projecting our own political polarity onto the legislative branch. We elect the president based on his ability, or we should, based on his ability to uphold the Constitution. But all too often we vote based on party loyalty. And although Supreme Court justices are appointed by the president, they must be confirmed by the Senate. There again, we the voters are the common denominator. The buck for upholding the Constitution and protecting American freedom stops with us. Now let me circle back to my original question. Are the Articles of the Constitution protecting Americans' freedoms? The answer is both yes and no. The framers of the Constitution ingeniously outlined a system of government with 3 branches and numerous checks and balances. And for the most of the last 250 years, these articles have channeled a vibrant democracy that has protected liberty. However, a document of little more than 4,000 words is limited in its ability to outline every possible functioning of the government and our ever-evolving needs as a country. The true power of the Constitution rests on the goodwill of citizens, the voters, you and me, to honor its spirit when electing our country's leaders. Executive orders will not threaten freedoms if voters are predominantly concerned with freedom and constitutionality, and we demand it from our leaders. Here I am reminded of what Benjamin Franklin said to that passerby outside the first Constitutional Convention, when she asked him about the form of government that they had decided on. His reply, "A republic, ma'am, if you can keep it." Benjamin Franklin knew that our new radical form of government in 1776 could not be sustained without the will of the people. He realized that no matter how tirelessly has he and other framers worked to make the Constitution, the ultimate roadmap for securing the blessings of liberty and our privacy would be ultimately up to the voters who continuously cultivate these freedoms and demand it from our leaders. For this reason, I cannot blame the Articles themselves for any regression in our freedoms. It rests with the people through our representative government and our enforcement of the checks and balances. And like the preamble says, it starts with we the people. My point is particularly salient in an election year, and it is my hope that all Americans will exercise their own freedoms this November and vote for candidates that they believe who will respect the values of the Constitution and the articles outlined therein. In closing, as we approach Veterans Day in November, I would like to leave you with this thought. Every day, hundreds of thousands of Americans place their lives and even the well-being of their families at risk so that we can maintain our freedoms. If you think about it, the Constitution is just a piece of paper. By itself, it does not guarantee anything. It takes our collective human energy to bring the preamble and the articles to actual life. Just as soldiers like myself work to defend our nation's sovereignty against our foreign enemies, I ask that you, my fellow citizen, to defend our Constitution domestically by holding our leaders accountable. It's not that a foreign country will be our undoing. It will be our own apathy. Thank you for joining me on the front lines.